I'm super excited to share with you today what I've learned in the last 29 years of entrepreneurship. But before we start, I always love to get people to move, right? Because one of the hats that I wore for 20 years was a physical therapist, right? We basically taught people how to move their bodies properly. So what I'm gonna have all you do is just stand up, and you're gonna find the person nearest to you to hug. Just hug the person, whoever's close to you. Good job. Now I want you to stay standing. And now there's like 3 steps to this process. That was step 1. Step 2 is you're going to hug the same person, or if you hug more than one person, the same people. And this time, when you go to hug them, instead of going to your left, you're going to go to your right, the opposite side. Go to your right side and hug. And there's one more step, so stay standing. So now, you're going to hug the same person or same people in a way that is fun and in a way that you've never hugged before. You're gonna innovate, because we're at the Innovation Summit, you're going to innovate a new way to hug. Go. Nice. I love the creativity. All right, thank you for playing along, and now you can sit down. So what's interesting is, did you all notice that without any instructions, how many of you without any instructions, meaning the first hug, raise your hand if you went to your left. Raise your hand without instructions if you went to your left side, right? Majority of people, right? And so isn't that interesting? And how many of you have taken a class on how to hug? No one. However, without any instructions, the majority of the people, I would say 90% of the people, all of you went automatically to your left, right? And so it took a little bit of additional instructions to go to your right side, which is quite interesting, which I'll talk about in my presentation. And the last one, how did you feel when you hugged that innovative way? Raise your hand if that brought on more energy into your system. Did it feel more exciting, more energetic, more vitality into your system, right? And so essentially, that last version is you're playing. You're being playful as you're living. The second way, the reason I had you all go to your right, is that it is a more intimate hug. Because anatomically, if you go to your right, your heart is right next to the other person's heart. It's a deeper experience, right? And so what's, again, interesting is that we tend to automatically go to the left. And I'll talk about these contexts and these boxes that we've been living in without realizing that we've been living in a box, right? Because one of the processes of innovating, truly innovating, is to exist or innovate from a place that's outside of this box, the typical boxes, right? We would call that innovation, right? And so I will share a story with you. So I came to America from Taiwan in 1983 when I was 8. And when we first landed here, my mom, single parent, and my older brother and myself, we literally picked from the trash for our furniture. The first year we lived in a place where it was like a room with a bed. We didn't have a bathroom, we didn't have a kitchen. We had to walk across the street to use the bathroom in the kitchen. And many years later, I built multiple businesses. I've been doing entrepreneurship for the last 29 years. And so I truly believe that with a dream and with devotion, we can accomplish anything. And one of the lessons I've learned from building multiple businesses is that a business really is yet another box that we're building as a way to learn about ourselves. Right? We typically set these intentions of building businesses for an external reason. That could be changing the world, it could be generating income, it could be a mix of everything. Sometimes we don't realize that businesses is really a mirror of us. And for true innovation in our businesses, we basically truly innovate ourselves. Right, that's an important concept. To innovate in a business, we innovate ourselves. And so before I get into that process, part of the innovation process is to recognize the boxes that we're currently in. Right? If we want to exit a box and look into the boxes, we want to recognize the boxes that we're in. And so one of the things that I always like to share is we all live in boxes. Like literally, our physical body is a box for our consciousness. Right? We literally live in a box. And there are some boxes that we don't realize that we're in. How many of you in the last week, or even while you're here, have seen the sunrise or the sunset? Raise your hand. Sunrise, sunset, right? That context of the sun rising and the sun setting is a box. It's a context, it's a paradigm. Of course, you all realize the sun doesn't really just rise and set. That is one box. If we zoom out and observe reality from the galaxy, what's really happening is the Earth is rotating. Right? The sun's not rising and setting. It's the Earth rotation that creates our context of the sun rising and setting. Right? Does that make sense? Right? So there's this other context that the sun isn't rising and setting. It's the Earth rotating, a completely different box. Right? And so I have some notes. Usually I don't use notes, but in the last 2 months, I was recovering from a severe staph infection. It was like systemic, eating my brain and my heart. I had to do a lot of things to recover from it, so I get to use notes. And so one of the things that we hear a lot in entrepreneurship and innovation is thinking outside the box. And yet, what's interesting is the context of thinking outside of the box is a box in itself. Right? It's a paradigm. In other words, we really can't ever exit boxes, right? We're constantly living in context and stories. And so once we realize that, what we get to do is choose the box that is big enough for innovation and choose the box that is fun and exciting to play in. Right? And so that's really the takeaway from the talk. My goal is to empower you with the framework, the process, the strategy, and the tactics on how to do this. Right? And I'll give you an example. In one of my companies called Immortal, we were designing a workstation. Right? And so unlike other companies that design workstations like a standing desk or a chair, and what they've done is they've looked at the existing desk and the existing chair to improve the desk and the chair. What we did was I pretended I've never been to Earth. I pretended that I was an alien in space. I've never seen any Earthlings. I've never seen any furniture. I've never seen a chair or a desk. And in my spaceship, I intercepted files on how the human body looks and how the human body functions. But I've never seen any human furniture or rooms. And from that place, we were able to innovate something that isn't a chair, that isn't a desk, because I've never seen one. And the thing that we innovated completely makes you more healthy while you're on the computer. Right? We completely switched the paradigm from making it comfortable, but yet it's not healthy. We all know sitting in front of the computer for like 4 hours is just not healthy for you. And so you got to get away from the computer every 30 to 45 minutes. We invented something that you actually become more healthy while you're on the computer. And the only way to innovate that way was to come from a very different box, right? From this like alien perspective of never seeing any furniture. So that's an example of choosing a different box to play and innovate in. And it was fun. It was actually really fun to pretend I was an alien in a spaceship, right? So we get to choose how we want to feel, the state that we're in as we're innovating or working. Right? Sometimes we forget that. We get indoctrinated that we must be sacrifice and it must be hard and it takes a lot of energy. It doesn't. We can actually work and innovate in a way that's fun, exciting. We actually become more energetic when we're done, because we're actually adding more energy into our system. All that is absolutely a choice. It's just a choice that's not common, so we don't know how to make that choice. Does that make sense? Right? And so we're going to think about what is the process and how do we unbox ourselves in order to make these hidden choices that's not given to us, right? And so in order to do this process, we must recognize the boxes that we're in currently, right? And so I'm going to give you some examples of boxes that we're all existing in that we don't realize. How many of you have kids? Just raise your hand. Amazing. I have 2 daughters. And so imagine this. Imagine your kid comes home from school and they show you their report card, right? So you look at the report card, and the report card, you look at it, and then unfortunately on this report card, everything's an F. It's the lowest grade possible, right? It's like F, English, F, science, F, math, F, everything's an F. So you look at the data, which is the F, all the Fs. You look at your kid, you look at the data, and you go, I got it. You have stupidity. Right? Like we would never say that, right? We would automatically say, what happened? Did you not sleep well? Were you sick during the semester? Was there a bully in class? Was the teacher mean? We would automatically language in a way to get to the root cause of the Fs, right? When you go to your doctor, what happens? They look at your blood work, they look at the data, and they say, you have high blood pressure, you have diabetes, you have high cholesterol, you have. Right? And so we don't realize that the system, the medical system, while it has incredibly loving, heartfelt doctors who want to help people, but the context that they live in is to imprint you with you have. And that language of you have is extremely powerful. Imagine telling your kid you have stupidity for a few years straight. What happens? The kid believes they're stupid. They take on that identity. Just like if we tell someone you have diabetes for many years, what's the language they adopt? I am a diabetic. It becomes their identity. And so these are boxes that we get to question, right? There's nothing good or bad or right or wrong about these boxes. I'm just giving you these examples of boxes that we literally exist in, we just don't question. And for true innovation, we want to question all the boxes, right? And so that's the medical box example. Business box, right? And so the typical context of business is something that we build, right? It's this external thing that we build as a machine or a vehicle to do something else, right? But what if the business is really just yet another expression of who we are, right? That's a very different context. If the business is an expression of who we are that just happens to generate money, and money in itself is another box which I'll get to. Through that lens of business as an expression of the self, every moment that you're working on or in the business becomes a mirror of who you are. In other words, you can build the same exact business with the same machine, with the same team, the same culture, the same outputs of products or services, the same innovation, but yet through this lens of the business is an expression of me. Every moment you're going to learn about yourself. And learning about the self, we would also call that personal development. You can call it spirituality. It's the grand question of who am I? Which I believe is one of the greatest journeys, the greatest work we can do in our lives, right? And so that's the business box. And, okay, so there's the physical reality box. This is my favorite box to kind of review and talk about. So how many of you have seen the videos on YouTube or heard about or read the double slit experiment? Raise your hand. Okay, so a few of you. So I'll briefly go over it. You can watch it on YouTube. You can look it up. But essentially, these experimenters shot photons out of like a mini cannon, and they've shot these photons repeatedly, and there was a wall, and the wall had 2 slits, and there was another wall behind the 2 slits, and they wanted to see what would happen. And what they theorized is that these photons behave like waves, right? So when these waves came out, these cannonballs that behave like waves came out, they would have hit each other, they would have make all these different dots on the second wall, which is what happened, right? However, when they repeated the experiment, and this time they recorded the process, in other words, this time there was an observer, those photons only made 2 dots. It completely changed the behavior of light particles. In other words, what they realized is that our attention and intention on matter changes matter itself. Right? What that means is science shows that as you're all looking at me, my molecules are behaving differently. Thank you all, right? Like, in other words, if you weren't all looking at me, in theory, I'd just be a wave. I would not have a physical body, right? And so we literally have the ability to affect physical matter. And that's just one layer of the double slit experiment. The deeper layer, I won't get into because it's a bit hard to explain. It goes into how time may not actually exist. So I'll just stick with the first layer. But I encourage all of you, if you don't know about the double slit experiment, to look into it, because it will start to give you literally scientific proof that our physical reality isn't what it appears to be, right? And so the next one, biophotons. So we now know through actual medical research, this isn't like theory, that 78% of your DNA does not make proteins that runs your biological bodies. 78% of your DNA makes biophotons. In other words, 78% of you is made to emit light, and only 22% of you is made to run what I call the sacred meat suit, our body. Right? Imagine you're literally 3/4 light beings and light bulbs, and only 1/4 biological beings tricked into thinking we are 100% biological. Right, and so this gets very interesting with biophotons. So we've known that for about 30 years. That's not even new knowledge. In the last 6 years, we now know that our DNA also has receptors for biophotons. Now, what does this mean? It means that all of you know fiber optics, right? Like data through fiber optics, which is light. We are literally a fiber optic emitting light bulb. Every thought, every emotion, every experience you've ever experienced in this lifetime is literally broadcasting away from you because you're making these light particles that carry data. And your DNA has receptors for these biophotons. And so we now know that our cells can communicate not just through chemicals and electrical pathways. Our cells can communicate through light. Now, here's the interesting part. When you emit a biophoton, it's not like it stops just in your body. The biophotons, these light particles, are going into the universe and into each other. So the other way I said it is, all of you that's in the room right now, your every thought and every emotion you've ever experienced is broadcasting into everyone else who has and have receptors to receive that data. How many of you have walked into a room and had this gut feeling or a feeling about someone, right, without meeting them? Raise your hand. We can science this, right? And this is pre-quantum, right? We don't have to go into quantum entanglement. This is literally just straight light bulb, shining light particles carrying data, hitting their DNA receptors, giving them data. Their data is giving me data. Literally, this is physical reality, right? New context. And so the last one, I always mention Sandra Ingerman. She is a well-known shaman. And what they did with her was they sat her down, they put a glass of water in front of her, and they poured sodium hydroxide, which is a very strong base. And they changed the pH of the water from 7 to between 10 to 12. They repeated the experiment. So and sometimes it was 10, sometimes 11, sometimes it was 12. Without touching the water, she just sat there using her energy, her thoughts and emotions. She repeatedly was able to decrease the pH by 2 points. Now, keep in mind those numbers, remember in high school chemistry, a 1 point change in pH, because they're logarithmic, is a 10-fold decrease. So the decrease of pH by 2 points, she decreased the pH of the water using her thoughts and emotions by 100-fold. So imagine what our thoughts and our emotions are doing to the water inside of our bodies, if we can do that to water outside of our body. Right? Again, I'm giving you these examples for us to start to question what we are capable of with our physical reality. I've gone through training this Indonesian form of martial arts called Merpati Putih, and within 2 days, we were able to see without our eyes. While blindfolded, we could grab objects, navigate obstacle courses. There's videos of students, like kids, like driving go-karts, hitting a baseball, completely blindfolded, right? Just using energy. And even more incredible is one of the teachers from Indonesia was on the news there. He is in the newsroom being interviewed. And the screen is a split camera. So on the one side, he's in the interview. On the other side of the screen are a pile of bricks 30 miles away. While he's in the studio, he does this with his hand, and the bricks break. Right? And so, again, there's something else going on with physical reality that we're not realizing that we get to question, right? And so these are examples of things that we get to question, right? Question everything, every context, every paradigm, because that process starts to help us get into this innovative state, to unbox things, right? And so in order to innovate, I always think things in terms of fractals or the Russian nesting doll, right? How many of you know that the Russian nesting doll is like the outer doll, if you open up, has a smaller doll, you open up, has a smaller doll, right? And so I'm going to give you a context for innovation. The smallest doll are going to be your ideas, right? If you're like trying to create a business or start a new project or decide what you're going to invest in, your thoughts are that inner doll. The outer doll that's dictating this doll is the context, right? How are you approaching this entire process? The doll that surrounds that context are the words that you're using, right? The language, which I'll get into. The doll that encases that doll, that controls that doll, are your stories and your beliefs. And then the doll that holds everything is going to be your identity, right? And so for true innovation, what I found from working with hundreds of entrepreneurs is that you need to be paying attention to every doll, not just the ideas. You need to pay attention to every doll, okay? And so we've talked about the ideas, we talked about context, questioning your boxes, choosing your boxes. Now we're gonna get into the doll of stories, words, and identity, right? And so every word that we say is a spell that we're casting, right? So, in English, we talk about spelling words, right? We don't piece the alphabet together. We spell words. And this is language from ancient alchemy. For thousands of years, they knew that every word that we speak and think is literally affecting reality, right? And so I'll give you some simple ideas of how our words can affect our state. And I'm sure all of you realize that your state, right, whether you're feeling joy, excitement, or let's say anger or depression, in those states, you're gonna think and do different things about your business, right? Really simple. So imagine this. Imagine waking up and saying, I have to wake up, I have to put on clothes, I have to brush my teeth, I have to get dressed, I have to go in my car, I have to drive to the office, I have to do my reports, I have to talk to the team. The energy would feel like it's draining, right? If we simply just switch to, I get to wake up, I get to brush my teeth, I get to put on my clothes, I get to get in a car, it feels much more exciting, right? This is just a really simple example of how words can affect our energy and our state. Just one simple word change from have to get to makes a huge difference. And so I encourage all of you to start to pay attention to what are the common words that you're thinking and speaking, and notice what is that doing to your state, right? Because our state is probably one of the most important things that you can be mindful of, because we're creating from that state where it's our vibration and our energy, right? And so the next common language that I hear is, how many people have thought or spoken the words, I'm under stress? You can raise your hand, I'm under stress. Great. And even now, I just want you to say and think the words, I'm under stress. And now you're gonna switch it to, I'm on top of stress. Does that feel differently inside your body? I'm under stress compared to I am on top of stress. Same stress, just a different metaphor, right? The reason that's so powerful is our subconscious mind really dictates our lives, which I'll get into later. our subconscious mind uses these images in order to program ourselves and to program all of reality, right? And so the last part is our nouns, right? So there's an incredible speaker, innovator out there, Tom Chi. He was head of Google Innovation, tasked with solving a world problem a day, every day, a new world problem, and his team would solve it. And he gave a great talk at an event I was at, and he spoke about how nouns are the antithesis of learning, right? Nouns are the antithesis of learning. And he proved this. He put up a slide of a fork, and he said, let's talk about this thing without calling it fork. And within a minute and a half, we learned about the history of the fork, where it came from, the Roman Empire, how it spread through the world. We learned so much about it in 90 seconds because we couldn't call it a fork. Because once we called it a fork, we're like, we're done, we know it, right? And so anything that we are questioning, and we have these nouns that we're applying to, again, start to think about that topic without using that noun. Really simple way to innovate. And then the I am really is our identity, right? And so one of the things that we are all in is our identity, right? You might think I am strong, I am courageous, I am kind, I am an entrepreneur, I am an investor, I am an innovator. We all have these labels. Here's the interesting part, especially for those of you that have kids, you can feel into this. Would you love your kids any less if they were strong, but they were also weak? If they were courageous, would you love them any less if they were fearful? If they were kind, would you love them any less if they were mean? Probably not. And so what I'm getting at is we are meant to fully embrace our identity and the opposite of that identity. In other words, if you do identify yourself as being strong, you're meant to fully embrace being weak as well. The attachment to just being strong without fully also embracing being weak will always create resistance, what you would call and what everyone else would call and what I would typically call problems in life. And again, this is a deeper practice. If I had another hour, we can go into a physical practice to literally start to become non-attached to one side of our identity and start to fully embrace and love both sides of everything you've ever identified yourself as. And through loving both sides, you literally become more open, right? You're like fully experiencing the full box instead of just half the box. Does this make sense? Right, and so I'm gonna give you some ways to do this because I only have 4 minutes left. So I've created, from studying this stuff for 34 years, simple processes. I know I didn't have enough moments on stage here to put all of you through this process, so I put up a QR code so you can access the process. And so this process that you'll see, and you'll be taken to a page with a video. Don't watch it now because I want you all to watch me. It's much more fun. And so you can watch it later. But basically, you will be given a guided meditation to dissolve stories, right? I talked about we have our words, our stories, and our identities. And you have hundreds, if not thousands of stories, so I don't have enough time to dissolve all of your stories and unbox all of your stories, right? If you all want to come hang out for like a week, we can do this. But the meditation that you're going to give is a tool you can use to dissolve any story from a subconscious perspective in your life. And this is very important. We can all reframe stories consciously, but our conscious mind, and this is an oversimplified way to describe it, our conscious mind can process between 400 to 200 bits of information per second, depending upon which study you read, between 400 to 200. Our subconscious mind can process between 200 million to 400 billion bits per second. Guess which one's more powerful? 4 to 200 versus 20 million and 400 billion bits per second, your subconscious mind. And so this is why you can change your stories. In other words, for example, if you tell someone, hey, just stop smoking, and they're a smoker, and they go, okay, I want to stop smoking. If it was that simple, people just wouldn't smoke. But there's a subconscious mind. And so the meditation is designed to work at the subconscious mind of your stories to dissolve those stories so you no longer have the imprint and the energy and the manifesting of those stories. So extremely powerful, right? And so, feel free to access that. And I want to say I've spoken a lot about being in boxes, and I want to make sure that I impart onto all of you that being in boxes is not a bad thing, right? We get to appreciate being in a box so that we can exit the box, right? I'm sure you've all been in weather that's extremely cold, and when you get next to a fireplace, it feels amazing. Or you've been in places where it's like really hot, and you get in a place with air conditioning, and it feels amazing. That's all life is. Life is about experiencing these contrasts to appreciate the contrast, and more importantly, to learn the hidden messages by experiencing the contrast, right? Intellect and knowledge comes from the experience of the context. Wisdom comes from discerning the secret message from experiencing the context. All right? So, I believe the greatest journey in creation is our own realization of who am I? And so for all of us in this room, I'm sure you're here because of, well, you all have your individual reasons, but it is called the Innovation Summit, Volcano Innovation Summit. And so I believe all of us have the capabilities to innovate a future that is unlike any moment of the now. As we apply this, right? A complete new context, new words, new context, new ideas, new stories, and new identities. And I'll share some powerful messages I've been given through meditation. We're meant to transition from balance to harmony. Balance is two variables that we adjust volume and intensity. Imagine a piano and a violin. Balance is you play for 10 minutes, I play for 10 minutes. You play this loud, I play this loud. Harmony is two instruments playing together, making even more beautiful music. So you start to think, where in life are you applying balance and switching to harmony? I also believe that we're now innovating from what can I do to what can we do. We're also going to transition from competition to collaboration, because there's no way the world's going to survive if we stay within the competitive my box versus your box, as opposed to we all live in the same box. Let's just play together. And lastly, I believe that everything that you do is just a great mirror for who you are. And our greatest innovation is the innovation of the self. So thank you.